Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Planet Labs. We finally made our way to this stock as well, and on this chart we start our count from the all-time low where we have here a potential wave on up, we have here a wave 2 down we would be tracking, and this would be our wave 3 to the upside. Normally, within such a structure we have on this chart, I could sometimes consider that this would have been a truncation part of this extension to lower prices, yes? A truncation meaning that we didn't actually manage to extend to new lows within the wave 5, given that the market sentiment may have shifted and created a slight distortion in such an area. We have an acceptable retracement for this to be a consideration, and that would allow us to even look for an initial 5V move to the upside within this structure, but unfortunately, for this chart, I would actually require that we build a follow-up impulse if this is indeed to be a successful interpretation where we track a truncation. Given that within this wave 3, we heavily lack structure, suggestive of an impulse being at play here, I would rather consider that instead we would be tracking a leading diagonal on this chart even within the bullish interpretation, meaning I would definitely start my count only from the all-time low within an A, B, C pattern within the wave 1. Now, since we also have a leading diagonal we are dealing with even within the bullish interpretation, we need to be prepared for a considerably more difficult pattern to actually be tracked. And that is exactly what I'm looking at here on this chart, where I would consider this wave 3 to be developing within an internal ABC structure. It's not the only possible interpretation, certainly, but this is probably my preferred scenario to track for the structure on this chart. So, how would we be looking at this? Within this wave C, or even the wave 3 as a whole, we do not have any strong signal at this point that a top would be in place. So how would we actually track this structure? So I would first start looking for the 5V move to the upside. Since this is a wave C, I can be tracking an ending diagonal within this structure, which allows me to look only for 3 waves within each of these subwaves in this push to higher prices. So within the wave 1, we have here an A, B, C structure. Within the wave 3, once again, we have an A, B, C structure. And within the wave 5, we are looking to only build an A, B, C structure before we would actually be able to consider a pattern, a count to be full within this area. Now, as you notice, we are looking at a structure that could very well have a top in place within this as a wave 3. Sure, it is a possibility. I am considering that this wave 3 doesn't need any further extensions, and the structure is clearly starting to lose momentum, right? Within the first 3 waves in this push, we can see we had pretty similar proportions. This is also one of the issues that doesn't really allow me to track an impulse, but this is also what allows me to consider that within these previous movements, the momentum has been consistently increasing. With this latest extension, we had considerable struggle in extending to even higher prices, and we can use a few tools to actually identify this. Firstly, probably the most simplistic approach would be to use the RSI. Yeah, we can notice even on the weekly, we are starting to see some divergences. This can be quite expected within a wave 5, even part of a larger wave C. Within the wave 3, we have managed to form the highest point. And since this is an ABC pattern within the wave 3, we expect the peak on the RSI to be within the wave C. More particularly, the wave 3 of the wave C. We can notice this to be the case. With this peak we have formed, we have the peak on the RSI, right? Then we have made a small wave 4 correction, 3 waves, very nicely, and we have extended to higher prices. Well, this can show divergences, and we have moved here on the daily. It is visible here, but also on the weekly. This still remains the case that we notice divergences. And this is not a confirmation that a top would be in place, but it is a signal of momentum decreasing, yeah? There is increasing doubt in this extension to higher prices. There is a slowdown in the strength of this structure, and this is quite important. Then we could also take a look at the volume. We can notice that even though we have been struggling to extend with more strength, the volume has actually been increasing. Well, this isn't necessarily a good thing because that means there are some buyers and the bulls are practically winning. But even though they are winning, while we had more volume than we had in this initial extension to higher prices, we failed to form stronger movements. This is also a suggestion of increased selling at the same time. Then we could also be using some trend lines. This is more of a DIY path to look for some signals that the structure is weakening. We could be looking at the peaks we had along this structure to the upside. We could take, for example, these first peaks after this initial push. We can connect them to this follow-up peak. Yeah, we actually get here a 3 touch point, which is quite nice. Well, we have failed to get another touch point here in this latest extension we have within this wave 3 top. Another signal that this structure would be weakening. Well, within this follow-up extension, it doesn't seem to be complete necessarily. It could still extend at this point, but so far we have an even larger gap. So that is another thing to consider. If we want, we can even connect these follow-up tops to get a feeling that yes, once again, we have failed within this latest extension to push into these levels. Now, once again, this can still turn, and these are just some ideas of how we could identify some more weakness on the chart. And by the way, let me know if you appreciate having those additional indicators, some additional signals we could use for various indications on the chart. Let me know if you find them useful. Maybe type something like useful in the chat if you consider them to be the case. And let's move into the actual structure here. So, as I was saying, within this wave 3, we are tracking a wave C here, which is an ending diagonal. Within this wave C, we would have a wave 5 in this structure, not absolutely necessary. Technically, this wave 3 can still extend. We have a couple of options for that even. But in the idea that this could be the wave 5, we would be looking for an ABC pattern. And by the end of this video, we will have available the most important levels of support, never mind the larger structure we would be developing more clearly within this wave C. We are just focusing on this interpretation at the moment, as this allows us to have a more conservative mindset that prepares us for a more substantial top to be in place at any point. So, in this fifth wave to the upside, we are tracking an ABC pattern, and we have a couple of options even here. We could be tracking here the wave A to have a 5-wave pattern, right? That is an actual possibility. The wave A doesn't need to be a 3-wave structure, and in fact, I might even prefer that based on the currently available structure. Of course, this is no guarantee, and that is why we will even track this within the yellow interpretation, because I want it to be clear. This structure is perfectly capable of having a top in place within this wave 5. It doesn't need to make such extensions. But also tracking the levels of support for continuation to higher prices within the wave A, that would also allow me to define where I should be prepared for something considerably more bearish to be going on in this structure. So, in this wave A in yellow, I would consider this to potentially be something like a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In this structure, I would have a leading diagonal within the wave A. In this interpretation, I really wouldn't need anything else to consider the wave 3 complete. We can go here in the smaller time frame, and it appears the actual low has been here. Doesn't really change anything, to be honest. But yeah, we have here an A, B, C structure within a wave 1, something like that. It doesn't matter exactly. We would be looking at the ideal target of the wave 3 to have been reached within this structure to be able to reliably track continuation to higher prices. And we can notice we have pushed into the 138.2% extension of the wave 1. That is the ideal target. We have also done so by creating an ABC pattern. This seems to be a zigzag pattern, quite ideal within such a structure. And within this wave C, while we could extend to higher prices, the pattern looks quite complete. We have a possible ending diagonal within this structure. We might be able to get away with the idea of an impulse, but the idea is we have a 5-wave structure complete. It doesn't need any further extensions. So I would be looking for the area of support for a wave 4, which allows me to look as low as the 61.8% retracement. Yeah, we would be looking at $28.4 level, where ideally we do not see a sustained break below this level to still allow this pattern to be a reliable extension to higher prices. Now, some considerations to be made. Within a diagonal structure, ideally we do get into the territory of the wave 1. We have the wave 1 top a bit below the support zone for a wave 4, so a wick into that area would be even ideal. And within classic Elliott Wave theory, this would be an absolute requirement. In my experience, however, it has proven useful to allow this to not be a complete requirement to still be able to track the idea of a diagonal structure, at least in today's markets. That is also why we are tracking the possibility of having a top within this wave 5. I mean, we are always tracking both cases, the bullish and the bearish scenario, where we could consider this to have been instead an ABC structure within a wave A. We would have here a larger ABC structure, which would allow this wave 5 to be complete. We are tracking the same pattern in the yellow interpretation, but it's under the idea of an extension. Now, can we track continuation to higher prices within other outcomes? Well, technically yes. I could consider what we have shown here in the wave 5 in white to be instead a wave A complete. We could be looking for a B wave correction and then extensions still to higher prices within a wave C. But that would actually be a quite unreliable pattern in my opinion, which contains incredible risk and allows a much deeper retracement without really providing necessarily a reliable or a structure that would be promising that I would consider. Nonetheless, we have the levels of support available. And one more thing, we could be tracking for this structure before we end the video. When we have such difficult patterns, such difficult charts, I like to look for different indicators that could allow me to get some additional information on the overall developments in this structure. So I have identified here a parallel trend line we could be tracking for continuation to higher prices. Is it perfect? No, by any means, but we do get here in this lower boundary 3 or 4 touch points we could consider that would allow this to continue to higher prices. Yeah, this is clearly not perfect. We did get here a dip below this trend line we are tracking, but it did get a very swift recovery. But yes, this is an additional area indication that could allow us to track this as continuation to higher prices in a direct fashion. Now, again, it is a weak structure. So some people might not even want to wait for the break of the area of support, depending on how largely this wave 4 correction would be extending. Yeah, but if we get a push into this trend line and then we see a bounce, we might identify that we could be onto something. Still waiting for this to be a confirmation, as at this point it is still a decently fragile structure. So for now, we will stop here. We have the levels we need to watch. For me, $28.4 is quite important. The overall structure of this chart could extend within quite a few ideas. Yeah, even this wave 3 could still be ongoing, but I do not find that necessary. I find this to be within a high risk territory, and I believe there are other better options currently available on the market than we have on this chart necessarily, but these are the levels regardless of what you choose to do with them. So this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and if you enjoy our content and want to support us directly, check out our channel membership. And as a thank you for any of these actions, I would like to invite you to sign up to our channel newsletter, where you get access to our monthly top picks where we identify for you high quality structures. Other than that, let me know what else you would like me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.